Well, hello, and welcome to Stop, Let's Team Up. Hi, I'm Ross Aiken. I'm a long-time comic book lover, and my first love in comic books has always been the superhero team. Let me give you a little background about me before we get gabbing about our first topic. I've been reading comics since the very early 70s when my brother, and this is memories that I'm piecing together at the age of my late 50s to when I was not even 10 years old. My brother Hugh has given me comics my whole life. He got me to read. And the first comics I remember ever reading are Avengers 105. It's a good one. Steve Englehart, John Buscema, Jim Mooney, Hawkeye in his miniskirt, and the return of the wonderful Black Panther. And we're just getting into that era where we're going to see the blossoming of the Scarlet Witch Vision romance and a slight change with the team under Mr. Englehart. It's wonderful. But also, the other comic that I remember is Superboy 197. And mostly I remember the Dave Cockrum Legion story. And it was the return of Timberwolf. Wonderful cover. And I fell in love with the Legion right then and there. And since then, I have always read Legion, always read Avengers, no matter what's going on in my life. I have not read the 3-boot, but we will be covering that probably sooner than later to kind of get me to read it. But this podcast is about superhero teams. And how we're going to cover things is, like today, we'll be covering a single issue. Marvel Superheroes Presents 18, the first appearance of the Guardians of the Galaxy. But we will also cover roll calls, where we'll pick a specific era, say Avengers 1 through 150, and we talk about the membership. We will also talk about story arcs. Like right now, I am reading A Traitor Amongst Them. It's the Epic Collection, which covers the return of the Swordsman and the introduction of Mantis. Things like that. Avengers Forever, the Great Darkness Saga. Heck, any of the JLA, JSA team-ups, always a soft spot. I am a JSA fan. I'm just a JSA fan. I just love them, and my favorite superheroes are all the Starmen. So we'll probably cover that. And we will also cover creators, and I hope to have guests come on. We'll definitely be talking about some of the greats, Gardner Fox, Roy Thomas, Chris Claremont, Grant Morrison, just all the great writers and creators and artists who have done superhero teams. I will definitely do a George Perez Love Fest, if I can find someone to come on and guest with me on that. But also, I am a podcaster. I am the co-host of 2 different podcasts, Gallifrey's Most Wanted with my friend Victoria, where we cover Doctor Who stories, one Doctor at a time. We'll do a first Doctor, then a second Doctor, and go and onward and onward. And we've been going for about 5 years. 5 years this January. And also the Runcible Port, a spin-off from Gallifrey's Most Wanted with our friend Jeff from England. And me and him will talk about anything else Doctor Who. And right now, this is going to go up the day I record it, which is the 28th of November, 2021. And we're covering the new Doctor Who series. So check that out, too. But that's enough gab. It's almost 4 minutes of me just jibber-jabbering. Now, let's get on to what we're covering. We are covering Marvel Superheroes Presents 18 from January 1969. And it features the introduction of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And I'm not going to go into how and why it was created. Looks like it was a tryout book. The creative team is Arnold Drake, writer, Gene Colan, penciler, Mike Esposito, inker, Stan Goldberg, colorist, Sir Herb Cooper, letters, and Stan Lee, editor. And the title of the story is Earth Shall Overcome. I remember my brother bought this comic from, I think he probably got it from this comic store that no longer exists, but it was the first comic book store I ever went to. Great people. Bill and Denise Johnson ran it. They haven't owned it in 30-some years, and then I ended up working at it. But it was one of these late 60s comics with a new story and then 2 reprints as backups. And it was, I guess, a tryout because they don't really, they appear in this and then they don't appear again until the Marvel 2-in-1s and the team-ups later on in the 70s. But this is a unique kind of comic in that I don't want to say unique. Okay, yes, unique. Because compared to what the Guardians are now, and they're like 4 phases of the Guardians. This introduction is one and by itself. One, the characters only look this way. Charlie X's costume is different. Vance Astrovic is wearing a pure purple costume. Martin X is Martin X. He looks like Rock Candy. And Yondu looks like Yondu. But I want to talk about the story. The story is great. If you have a taste for an early 60s Silver Age Superman story or Batman story, or because Arnold Drake created a Doom Patrol story, it is the least Marvel comic I've ever read. It strikes me more as a Silver Age DC. Arnold Drake is the creator of the Doom Patrol and wrote their adventures in My Greatest Adventures, and then when it turned into Doom Patrol. And it has a very DC feel. It starts with Charlie X landing on Jupiter and fighting the Badoon. And there's the malt shop sign in the background. There are all these little things. It is purely DC Silver Age in a lot of ways. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. I just mean that is a style and it's a type of story, and it's the closest analogy I can say to kind of get you to grasp what the story's kind of like. I will say I remember liking it more as a kid. I mean, I'm entertained, and it's a neat intro, but it is just an origin story. They do not appear again until much later, and they look different, and they're written, I'm going to say, a little better. They're a little more fleshed out. But they're different looking. I will say I love the Gene Colan art. I'm a huge Gene Colan fan. And there is sweeping action, nice panel layouts. The action is vibrant. He's drawing Iron Man at this point in 1969. I don't think he's done Daredevil. If he has, he's done Daredevil. He ends up doing Cap. I remember him as a Batman artist for years. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's very near the time he had done a handful of Avengers issues. The ones where we get to see Hawkeye's origin, and Hawkeye transitions from being Hawkeye to being the second Goliath. And I think those are some of my favorite Gene Colan issues. But this is amazing. But I think the star, for me, as a reader and a fan of comics, is the colorist. I think Stan Goldberg did an amazing job. And because it is so simple. It is a lot of like pastels. There's yellows and greens. And Vance Astrovic's purple costume. It's and a lot of solids. A lot of fields of color. It's not, I don't want to say as detailed, because I think this was a choice to have a lot of bold colors and colors you didn't normally see in superhero costumes. Yondu has the most 3-color normal color pattern. He's red, yellow, and blue. Vance Astrovic is all purple. Charlie is all yellow for the most part. It's a lot of fun. It's a good quick read, and it is very much of its era, and it was very interesting to read it. I looked forward to, because my first experience with the Guardians, I would assume was either I think it's in the Defenders issues or the Marvel 2-in-1s, because Marvel 2-in-1 was when I was a kid and I first started collecting. Marvel 2-in-1 was the title that I wanted to complete and have a whole run of, because it was easier. It was only up to about issue 60. And I remember the day I got number 1 at a little comic show in the little flea market where my comic shop was. And it was just the most exciting thing in the world is I had a complete run of a comic, even though it was just 1 through 60. But I remember those team-ups. I remember the crossover with the Defenders, and they introduced more of what will be the 70s, 80s, early 90s version of the Guardians. They had Starhawk, Alita, and eventually Nikki. And I recommend all those. They're in different volumes. I will post a note when I post this later today as to where you can find them. But these characters evolved, and then they changed in the 90s with a present day lineup with the lineup that the general public know more because of the movies, which are a lot of fun. So, but this is very different. If you've never read it, it is on Marvel Unlimited. That's where I had to read it for this. It's well worth checking it out. There's also some good backups, A Submariner by Bill Everett, and other things. It's well worth it. And I just think it's a comic that everybody can enjoy. That's it for Marvel Superhero Comics Presents number 18 with the introduction of the Guardians of the Galaxy. I just want to add, this is going to be a short episode, as the single issue ones may be. I will be solo for some of these. I'm hoping to have guests. I have one guest lined up to talk about creators, and I think you'll enjoy that. So some episodes will be quite short, like today's, and others may be a little bit longer if I have an interviewee. Before I go, I do want to talk about comics and my passion for comics. One reason I decided to start this podcast is that's my first nerd love. It is. I mean, I love talking Doctor Who. I have a great time with my partners and our guests. It's amazing fun. But I just sometimes want to talk comics. And I'm an older fan, and so my comic reading spans 40 years. And I'm one of those people you have to judge comics from when they were written, because their art is reflective of its time, and I want to kind of discuss that. Good or bad, there's eras that I enjoy more than others. There are eras that I find problematic now, but doesn't change the fact that sometimes you have to read those old stories and see how the worldview has changed. Because art and comic books are art, reflect our times, good and bad. They fix things. Sometimes I think art can be a contributor to change, and I think comic books are. I think they are to the people who read them. I think we learn fairness, justice. To quote Mr. Terrific, fair play. I kind of think that they do. I think they shape who we are and how we read them. And because basically most superheroes comics are morals plays, the good guy fighting to do the right thing, I do think you learn something from them, and I think they're fun. So I do want to discuss that. I hope you enjoyed this. I know it's real short, and I hope that's good and you're enjoying it. But I hope you join me. I'm going to start this podcast as a monthly or bi-weekly, depending on what subjects and guests I can line up. We will eventually move to YouTube. I am still learning that tech, but I wanted to get this up Thanksgiving weekend, as I said I would. Now, on to the last thing we're going to talk. What I'm going to do is something I'm going to recommend, and I will post a link to where you can get it. So my first comic book recommendation will be my favorite series of all time, Starman by James Robinson, Tony Harris, and Peter Sengard. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It was a 90-issue series, started in the 90s. It tells the story of Jack Knight, the youngest son of Ted Knight, the original Starman, and it is a magnum opus about the history of all the people who have been Starman and Starwoman. The Stargirl becomes Starwoman when the story's over, or she becomes Stargirl and part of the Starman family. It's beautifully drawn. It is amazingly written. I had the 6 hardbacks, but they now have giant omnibuses. They're trade backs, and it is on DC's app, DC Infinite. It is worth your time. I just started rereading it again. It is my favorite comic book run of all time, but it spoke to me. So I recommend that. Podcasts I recommend. First is A World on Fire, an All-Star Squadron podcast, and its sister podcast, Star Rocket Radio. It is hosted by the amazing Billy D, a.k.a. Doc Strange, and Herman. They're doing a wonderful job. I love All-Star Squadron. It is. I have downsized my comics. It's mostly digital and hardbacks and trades just for room. But my complete run of All-Star will never. My wife will have to have that buried with me because it is such an amazing title. And they're doing Infinity Inc. in Star Rocket Radio. Lots of fun. Lots of Jerry Ordway love. Both series are well worth checking out. They are just worth listening to. They are my go-to in the mix of all my Doctor Who podcasts. And my other plug is Fantastic's Comic Fan. It is a great short 15-minute podcast about digital comics you can read digitally. RL, the host, is really wanting to show how digital comics are a way to read your comics. It's a fun, interesting. He jumps around. He has a very good knowledge of what is available digitally and how it is a way to still enjoy comics without having to have the floppies or the trades. I enjoy his podcast a great deal. It is, and I like the fact that it is short, succinct, and to the point. And you can listen to it on your commute, because that's where I listen to my podcast, is to and from work. So I really check all three of those podcasts out. I think you'll enjoy them. I would also like, if you're a Doctor Who fan as well as a comic fan, to check out Gallifrey's Most Wanted. Both shows are under our feed at Gallifrey's Most Wanted. And you can find us at Gallifrey's MW Pod or at Runsell Report on Twitter. I manage both those feeds. And you can also find me at Stop Let's Team Up on Twitter. I would love to hear your feedback. I know a new podcast is a slow growth, so bear with me as I learn to do this solo. Normally, I have someone to help, but I really wanted to get this out and get this done, and I hope you enjoy it. So, folks, until next time, go read some comics.